I wanted to just take a moment to discuss Steve's role in the founding of the Review of Financial Studies, which, let me emphasize, was absolutely crucial. So the Review of Financial Studies, I think, as many of you know, sort of was a response to changes in was a response to frustration on the part of some in the profession with the distribution of editorial power across different styles in some of the leading journals. And maybe some other kind of agency issues with fee structures and the like too were sort of there in the background. And so, Joe Williams, I think, had a very interesting notion about trying to found a journal, and basically the folks at one of the other journals kept saying, well, entry is sort of easy, so why don't you enter? And they sort of said that to Joe one too many times, and Joe's an entrepreneurial sort, so he decided to push forward. So Joe started chatting with me, and then we identified who would be a very sensible, a very appropriate and distinguished founding editor of the journal, namely Michael Brennan. And we approached Michael, and Michael was very receptive. But there was one sort of small problem. Who was going to appoint Michael to be the editor of the journal? Well, I think Michael was sort of a little bit uneasy about being appointed by Joe and I, and with good reason. And so we realized, gee, Michael is receptive. We really can pull this off. But what would really be crucial was figuring out an appropriate way to appoint such a distinguished scholar as Michael Brennan, who had stepped down a number of years before as the editor of the Journal of Finance and had done a tremendous job there. What would be an appropriate way to have him appointed? And sort of so natural approach was to think, well, how could we get the superstars of our field to help us in this process? So along the way, I called Steve and described sort of what our vision was. And I still remember the conversation. The one question I was sort of very prepared for was, did I think there was a shortage of journal space in the profession? I sort of knew I was going to get that question. My answer was no, but I thought there was a distribution problem. And I sort of thought that Steve would likely potentially be sympathetic to that. And sure enough, he was. And Steve agreed to be on our founding committee. And furthermore, Steve agreed to then call Bob Merton, who then agreed to be on the founding committee. And I think they in turn made other calls. And in fact, at some point later on, one of the problems was I think we may have indirectly alienated one or two folks because the founding committee wasn't of unlimited size because we had such a distinguished group of folks being on the founding committee. But Steve's role in that was in the founding of the journal was absolutely crucial because while Michael was clearly very sympathetic to the mission of the journal, appropriately, there needed to be a mechanism for Michael to be appointed as the founding editor. And Steve's role in that process was central and instrumental. And without that, the Review of Financial Studies, I think, would not have been successfully launched. And so I wanted to just take this opportunity to publicly thank Steve for that, not only for myself, but I think on behalf of the profession as well.